Hello and welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. I'm once again joined by the Harry Enfield to my Paul Whitehouse, the wonderful Mr. Gaz Evans. In today's episode, we try to escape from the enigmatic tall man with Don Coscarelli's fantasy horror film, Phantasm. So join us as we get lost in a suitably creepy mausoleum, run away from the spherical murder balls, and finally try not to get annoyed by constantly being called boy. This podcast contains spoilers. So, Phantasm. This is a film that I have real fond memories because it feels like a film that I'm not saying I'm the only person in the world who knows about it, but it certainly feels like I'm one of a very small subset of people, you know. You hadn't seen it prior to doing this episode, have you?
I had not. I'm sure I remember the video cover from my local video shop in East Preston, which was MCM, which is long gone now, of course. It was run by a guy called Dave, who looked like a cross between 70s George Harrison and Charles Manson. But he was a very nice guy. Yeah, and I remember the front cover, and one of those things, just never saw it. I couldn't tell you why. I think it's because the front cover with the old guy and that kind of, and the weird sphere sort of with his sharp kind of things on it. It looked a bit maybe wizardy and fantasy, maybe, and so I never, and I wasn't kind of into that sort of stuff. I mean, I never saw Warlock for the same reason, because it was called Warlock, and so mythical kind of wizardy sort of stuff just did a bit. It is nothing to do with that. I now realise, because I saw this for the first time the other day, and I was really, really pleasantly surprised. I am aware that there is a kind of a cult following for the whole series, and for the most part, the whole series is as revered as the original, and they are all really, really good, except for the last one, apparently.
Yeah, so Phantasm Ravager, which is the most recent one, which was released in 2016, which was, I think, an 18-year gap between Phantasm 4 Oblivion and Ravager. And it's shot with like a TV style camera, which isn't, you know, the end of the world, but generally speaking, it feels more like a fan-made film.
Yeah.
It's not directed by Don Coscarelli,
right,
like the rest of them. It is written by him and produced by him, but it's not directed by him. It stars majority of the same cast in terms of the, you know, it's got Reggie, it's got Mike, and it's got Jodie. However, you can tell that the production costs are a lot lower, and generally speaking, it's a bit more, as the films go on, they do get a little bit more convoluted.
Right.
This one leaves a lot to the imagination, leaves a lot to the mystery kind of elements. Yeah. Whereas I think part of the problem with that one is it just tries to do too much. Yeah. Like it becomes like this whole multiverse type thing, which is weird.
Yeah.
And it feels very much like they've gone, okay, let's give a fan, an opportunity to make it. But
is that what it was?
Well, I don't think it was, but it feels like that. It feels very much like.
So why didn't he doubt?
I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure. I'm going to presume it was probably because I think he was making John Dies at the end.
Okay. Yeah.
No, actually, because that was 2012, I think. But for whatever reason, Don Coscarelli didn't come to direct it. So, but I would say that as a quadrilogy, the first 4 films, I think there's something there in each one for everybody. I think the first one is naturally the best, but you often get that with horror franchises.
Yeah.
But there's something for everyone. And actually, as you go through the films, you start to learn a little bit more about the backstory of these characters.
Oh, cool.
But going back to the first one, it's, you know, that I think for a lot of people, it's usually a film that either they haven't heard of or they've seen the cover, you know, but probably haven't watched. And
I mean, even I was aware of the kind of the killer sphere thing as a USP but I didn't realize it would be this. I don't know. It's a really inventive little film, which it's got ambition. You can feel the ambition throughout it. It's not look the acting isn't world class, but you can see the craft. You can see where the special effects have gone. You can see the influence of, that bit where it turns a little bit into kind of almost 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, just a really inventive little scene. Yeah, it's got a lot of heart, this film, I would say.
Yeah, for a film made in the late 70s, 79, it holds up incredibly well. Like, a lot of the time when you watch, particularly films that are lower in budget, the special effects you can see right through. The acting here, it's just on the upper side of B-movie acting, I would say. But I think you can get away with that with horror movies more so than with other genres. So I think it just about, isn't too distracting.
Yeah.
But as you say, the craft of the movie on I think, fourth, fifth rewatch, that's the thing that really stands out. So one of my favourite scenes is kind of repeated through, towards the end of the film and at the start of the film, is when Tommy, the guy who, gets killed right at the start, he's obviously, doing the bad thing with the woman in the graveyard, and you get that close up of the lady in lavender, and then it switches to the tall man, and just that shot right there is like a really kind of arty kind of shot. And it's not because you could look at this movie. I think part of the problem as to why people perhaps haven't seen it as much as you would have thought is because it's quite difficult to kind of say what it is. It's not it's because it came out around about the same time as Halloween.
Well, I was going to say it felt like it had been. So it felt like, because there's a few shots in the kind of like the typical suburbia later that look and feel, inevitably, I guess, like Halloween. Yeah. Because the fashion, the aesthetic, the kind of just the nice green lawns and the nice suburbia. I thought, this is obviously been influenced by Halloween. But then I looked into it a bit more and realised that actually this is a film that was made like at the weekend across a year.
Yeah, so it was shot in 77, and it took a year.
So that would have been at the same time.
So I think it's very difficult for anybody to say, it's just copying Halloween, because I think Halloween certainly wasn't out, and even if you're in the industry, you probably wouldn't necessarily know what's going on with that.
No.
But as you say, a lot of those shots do feel like that. That sun-kissed kind of LA style, Californian, suburbia that we do see in Halloween. Even the music is slightly Halloween-esque.
Well, because Halloween is set in Illinois, but it was filmed in California, wasn't it? So
yeah, but, of course it is set in Illinois, isn't it?
Yeah.
For some reason, I always think it's California.
Well, that might be it. It was filmed there.
So it has those same kind of feels. But with Halloween, even from the front cover, you can guess what it's going to be about. You see the knife. It's going to be, some kind of slasher movie. Whereas you see that sphere, for some people they may go, that looks really intriguing, that looks really interesting, and goes to watch it. But for I think the more casual movie goer will probably go, I've got no idea what that's about. Yeah. What's that weird scowl that this old man's doing? What's that about?
Yeah, already it opens with, gratuitous boob shot, bit of a sex scene, and that's pretty typical of this sort of genre. But already it's not just that. In fact, it's far beyond that. It's you get your violence, you get your sex, but that little edit, that little almost subliminal kind of cut to, is it the tall man?
The tall man, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, this is something different. This is already making me a bit more of an active viewer sort of thing.
Yeah, very early on you think, okay, I know exactly how this film is going to go, because you've got the gratuitous boob shot, and you think, right, it's going to be like every other kind of, slightly B-movie 70s horror, right? Okay. And then it just switches and becomes something a lot more, something with a lot more depth. Like I think the only thing that really pulls this film down is that acting, and potentially some of the script. There does seem to be a little bit of kind of leaps in understanding stuff. Like there seems like there's a conversation missing here and there. And the reason for that is because originally this film was 3 hours long.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think they made a shrewd decision not to make it 3 hours long, because an hour and a half is just right for a horror movie anyway. And it would have been even more kind of, passed over by the general fan if they'd have found out it was 3 hours. But I'm just going to go through the plot, because for those who haven't seen the film, it's going to be something which they probably won't be none the wiser after reading it out. So a teenage boy named Mike discovers that a mysterious undertaker known as the Tall Man is stealing corpses from the local cemetery and reanimating them as dwarf-like minions from another dimension. With the help of his older brother, Jody, and their friend Reggie, Mike unravels a terrifying otherworldly plot involving deadly flying spheres and warped realities, leading to a surreal battle against the forces of death and illusion. So that right there is a blurb is probably going to put off a fair few people, because it's like, well, it's because this film is it sci-fi? Is it horror? Is it fantasy? It's kind of a blend of all of them. It's not really one. I mean, I think it's probably more horror than anything else, but it's very, it can fit into those genres quite easily. It's not just your bog standard horror, and it's only a horror. It has all of these other elements. It's also coming of age as well in places.
The lad who plays Mike Baldwin, is it?
Yes,
he's really, really good, actually. He looks like a young Eric Stoltz.
He does, yes.
Really
Yeah.
Oh, there's the Tall Man. I tell you what, if they ever do a remake of this, they're going to have no choice but to cast Michael Shannon as the Tall Man.
100%.
It's not even a conversation.
That is some great fantasy cast. And this is actually a film that I do want to be remade, because I think, I often don't want remakes. I don't want them. I don't think there's a place for them in a lot of respects. But
it's under the radar enough that it would be...
That's why I think it... Because, it's not like Hellraiser, for example, which is revered. Everybody knows Hellraiser. Yeah. Everybody knows Halloween. Everybody knows... Nightmare on Elm Street. And all of those big, big horror films. So they don't
and those remakes weren't great, really,
and they don't need to be remade, because they're not adding anything. I think here, it's a film that not a lot of people have seen. They may know of it, but they probably haven't seen it. And I think you can do an awful lot with what's there. I think, it feels like a very much an unexplored kind of world that even after 4 films, there's still lots and lots of, 5 films, but I don't really count Ravager as a proper film. It feels like a very unexplored world. Yeah. And sort of my first kind of dealings with this film was, again, in a video rental shop. It was in Blockbuster, and they had a secondhand DVD section, and right at the bottom was this lenticular silver box set of the first 4 films. Yeah. And it has Angus Scrimm as the Tall Man on the front, holding that sphere that people's eyebrow-esque scowl on the front. And I looked at it and was like, that looks amazing. I don't know what that is. And I think at the time it was something like teenager was like, that seemed like Everest. So I think it was just one that was always there. Right. And I think that was kind of a bit of a an example of how unloved this film is by the general public, in that it was there, and it must have been there, I'd say, for a year and a half, 2 years. Nobody picked it up. It never even looked like people even picked it up to have a look at it, let alone, buy it. There was only one copy. It was secondhand. And eventually I got around to picking it up and went home and just binged all 4 films and was like mesmerised by it, but particularly the first one, because, the craft in it is the thing that really pulls you back time and time again. And
it's so carefully put together. And, when you're making a film at the weekend, for a year, you got to be committed. And funnily enough, well, before I looked into this further, what this film immediately reminded me of, for whatever reason, was Bad Taste, Peter Jackson's Bad Taste.
Yeah.
Mainly because of the old guy kind of antagonist and that white house in the middle of the countryside. As, on a surface level, at least, it looks a bit like Bad Taste. And, it's obviously not as gory. Well, what is as gory as Bad Taste? But it had the same kind of cinematic know-how and the same sort of, it's kind of got this same sort of energy and bad acting and that sort of stuff. And then I looked into it and realized, and of course, famously, Bad Taste, the same thing. He filmed it at the weekend for ages and ages and ages and ages. So it's just got something about it, this film, that just marks it out from all the different films of the same era. I think it's probably been quietly influential, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah, 100%. Like the biggest comparison that people will probably be able to make is with Star Wars and the Jawas. In Star Wars, they look very, very similar to the Sentinels, as they're later called in later sequels. It's almost a case of, well, which came first? Was it, and it was filmed at the same time. So again, it's a bit like what I was saying with Halloween.
I was surprised there wasn't a cease and desist then.
I think it's because it was a case of, it wasn't a case of it. Nobody really copied anybody. It was just purely happenstance.
Yeah.
And I think probably in terms of cease and desist, not enough people saw. Well, I say not enough people saw this film when it came out. So it was made on a $300,000 budget, which in today's coinage is of just under $1.3 million. Which is firmly in that independent filmmaking budget. And it because I was thinking, perhaps it wasn't particularly successful when it came out and it kind of died out. But it made, based off of $300,000, it made $11 million.
Blimey.
Which is crazy. I mean, that's about $50 million today.
Yeah.
And it's really sort of like, okay, so I'm trying to work out why didn't people, or why is this a film that only a small section of cinema fans kind of know about or have seen? And I was like, maybe it flopped when it came out. Nope, didn't flop when it came out. No. Well, it's got everything you kind of look for in a horror. It's got great soundtrack. It's got sort of great supporting.
Did it just get kind of buried underneath all the other things that, I mean, by the time those came out, we've got Alien by then, we've got Halloween by then, we've got the Friday the 13th by then, not Hellraiser, and as the sequels are moving on, we got the Star Wars films as well, blockbuster movies beginning to be a thing. Maybe it was just a crowded market, and this is the one that ended up being the little one ultimately, or for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe the I don't know. Did the tall man become quite as iconic as Pinhead? And sometimes you need something to hang these things on, and
Yeah, and it has it all. It does have it all there. So you do have that iconic villain. Okay, it's not quite as iconic as Pinhead or Freddy Krueger, or there isn't anything I would say immediately identifiable about him. He does kind of just look like a tall old guy, which is why I think it's great, because it's totally believable to have a Undertaker in your local town like that and be like, because mortuaries and mausoleums are quite kind of creepy, eerie places anyway. So it's not a big leap to go, there's a crazy, Undertaker in that town.
I love this bit where they just start jamming on the porch.
Well, that's
a lovely little song as well.
It's that song was an original composition by Jodie, the actor who plays Jodie, and they were like, well, let's just have a scene with Reggie and with Jodie playing on the porch, and the kind of like breakdown bit that they go into was I think created by Reggie. And it's interesting because I was watching a documentary about this, and this film, as I said, was previously about 3 hours long. And there was actually a scene in an ice cream bar with Reggie, and they built this little stage and like had him perform on it, and he was like, oh, that's cool. So Jodie gets a song in there, Reggie gets a song in there, and then they cut out Reggie's song.
Well, he ends up kind of stealing the song in a way with his kind of bar chords and just kind of like really kind of go for it. Yeah,
I think it's those tiny little things which I feel like you can kind of identify with those characters, or they become more likable than potentially your Laurie Strode's or your why can I not remember the woman from Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street? Nancy. There we go. They're identifiable. You can quite easily place yourself in this. Especially as a guy. Especially if you've got a younger brother, and
I mean that's another thing. I mean, I'm sure I'm wrong, but I mean it's perhaps one of the few kind of notable horror movies from that time which doesn't actually have a female lead, a final girl. Maybe that was something that kind of held it back a little bit. Actually, I mean, watching it again, I mean, it feels quite ahead of its time because actually, with the ending of this film, it becomes actually about grief. It becomes about it actually is a bit of a mental health thing going on with this because ultimately, well, it's arguable, but for the most part, it appears that most of this in the narrative is actually a dream. He's dreamt it all. And then, the tall man comes and kind of takes him away and that sort of stuff. But, it's got something to say about masculinity and grief and mental health, which maybe, was a little maybe a touch too cerebral for mainstream audiences or for horror audiences who are just looking for gore.
Yeah, I think that's, at the time, people were just looking for, you didn't really have that in anything else. It was just a case of, right, let's make the kills gorier, let's make them more imaginative, let's make the scares. Because this is a scary film, but it's not.
I think so, yeah.
It's not scary in the, I mean, there are a little bit of jump scares, but it's not scary in the sense of, average, he's coming for you, like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. It's more the mysterious elements of it and going, I don't know anything about these, these little small sentinel things. I don't know anything about this tall.
Vicious little fuckers as well, aren't they?
Yeah. And I think it is so ahead of its time. And, one of the anchors of the film and, a massive plot point is the fact that Mike is really kind of like fearful and scared of Jodie abandoning him.
Yeah.
And that's the reason he follows him everywhere, is because he doesn't want to be abandoned. And it's that thing of ordinarily, and it kind of does a little bit, but ordinarily films would really harbour on that annoying little brother, leave me alone, I'm trying to live my life. But actually, yes, you can see Jodie gets annoyed, but actually it's almost annoyed from the point of view of like, I don't know how to help him, as opposed to you're just annoying me, I can't live my life kind of thing.
And then when you do realise that it's all a dream and it's basically him, we find out that Jodie was killed in a car accident, and that makes it actually, I was actually quite moved by the end of it. I was like, I didn't actually expect that. It's difficult to talk about these things when we're seeing bare naked butts and breasts on the TV.
Yeah, it's always slightly distracting and perhaps doesn't quite underpin the severity of what we're talking about. And I think, I mean, obviously it has that in there, but I like that this film isn't just all of that.
That's what I like about
it. There is actually, this is going to sound totally misogynistic and it's not meant to, but there is actually a slightly logical reason for there being boobs and things like that in there. It's used to entice people because and it kind of is clear, but it's also kind of not. So the lady in lavender, who is the one who seduces Tommy at the start and kills him, and also tries to seduce and tries to kill Jodie, is basically the tall man, but he's shapeshift into the lady of lavender. So it makes sense for that to be there, because it's all, it's another thing about this film is it's funny as well. Like there's some real funny points that are naturally funny, rather than it being, oh, that's a gag that's been placed there.
Yeah.
It's actually like the fact that Reggie, for vast majority of this film, is wearing white trousers, white shirt, black waistcoat, and a black bow tie, looking like a traditional ice cream man, is really funny.
Yeah.
And Reggie's really charismatic in a really understated kind of way. He kind of comes into the scene and is very much like a light relief without it being, I'm here to be the light relief. So, but yeah, so going back to, the tall man, and, the tall man is essentially a shapeshifter and, shifts into the Lady of Lavender to entice, his victims essentially.
Yeah.
And so it has a little bit of logic there. Yeah, it's kind of paper thin, and it's probably a means to an end, and they probably worked backwards and went, how do we get boobs in this? As opposed to, right, here's what we're going to do. But it isn't, 90%, scantily clad women running around from the evil, evil villain. It's not that. And certainly a lot of other films of lesser quality. Luckily, I think all of the big hitters, your Nightmare on Elm Street, your Halloweens, your Jason Voorhees, your Friday the 13th, aren't that, and that's probably why they stick out more than anything as well. But certainly the sleepaway camps and the prom night type things are more of in that ilk. And going back to what I was saying about this, kind of has everything you would be looking for in a horror. So it's got likable, charismatic main characters. It's got great music and a great kind of soundtrack and theme. It's got a enigmatic, semi-iconic villain. It has a bunch of sequels. Not at the time when they first released it, but it's kind of got all of those things that you look for in a big horror genre. Yeah. And it is just such a shame that everybody I tend to speak to hasn't usually seen this film. And actually, it's usually if I know that somebody's watched Phantasm and I haven't mentioned it to them or told them, it's almost like a seal of approval. I was like, you're going to be all right. You are.
Well, I mentioned this to a few friends this week. I was like, I'm finally watching Phantasm for the first time, and one or two of them were elated. They've got such fond memories of it. This freaked me out. This is very, very well done, and I heard that this is quite a famous jump scare. The bed in the cemetery, and the sentinels coming out and attacking with just Angus Scrim looking menacing above the headboard. It's great that it's not a film purely based on jump scares, because that's my biggest pet peeve with horror films is I think jump scares are the easy way out. They're the easiest thing to make somebody jump because you just do something somebody's not expecting, and usually you put a loud noise along with it. Yeah. But actually the real kind of skill in horror is to do things where you know what's coming, or you can see it coming a mile off, and it doesn't jump out at you and it doesn't surprise you, but it's still scary because it's eerie, it's creepy, it's whatever it may be. I mean, I don't like them because I don't get scared very easily, but I do jump. I'm sensitive to jumping, and when I jump, it's like I really jump and it kind of jars my back. So So when I go and see a new horror film at the cinema, I sit there throughout the entire thing, and it's perfectly well known that I sit there with my fingers in my ears for the entire thing. I will watch everything, but when I sense that there's a jump scare, I will just put my head as base.
I mean, I'm exactly the same. Usually it's the hand sun visor comes up above the eyes and a finger in the ear because, as I say, it's just such a...
Because it's loud when it happens.
Yeah, it's usually, there are places for jump scares, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that a film shouldn't have them in there.
No.
But there are just films where it's like it's just constant. And it's like, oh, you're not doing anything interesting. You're just doing that. And anybody can do that.
But when they're well done, they become legend. I mean, Jaws,
Absolutely.
Signs, Exorcist 3, Carrie, they are some world-class ones.
Yeah, the end of Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of that in here. This was obviously before Friday the 13th. That final shot where Jason Voorhees is coming out and grabbing the girl on the boat is very similar to the ending shot of, the tall man coming through the wall, coming out of the mirror and grabbing a mic. It's very similar.
It reminded me of the end of First Nightmare on Elm Street, where Freddy comes out the front door and takes his...
And that was 5 years later.
Yeah, exactly.
And there will not be a single horror fan other than people of Phantasm who will claim that Nightmare on Elm Street stole that from something. And I'm not saying it did, because I don't think it did. I think it's more of just an influence.
Yeah, it's the thing that you did with horror films at the end.
Yeah.
You have a jump scare. It kind of maybe perhaps sets up a sequel as well. The threat isn't dead. So but then it was almost an expectation. Lots of Dos Equis beer in this.
Yeah, I reckon they must have gone to the local 24/7 liquor shop. But yeah, going back to it was made at the weekend. I think Don Coscarelli, and reading it, you kind of realise how much of a shrewd filmmaker Don Coscarelli is.
Yeah.
Because the reason he done it at the weekend is because he would rent the camera equipment on the Friday.
Right.
And in those days, when you rented camera equipment, you rent it for working days.
Yeah.
So you rent it on a Friday, so you would have it over the weekend, but only pay for the one day.
Yes.
And you return it on the Monday morning.
Gotcha.
And so you get three days of camera equipment for the price of one, which is, when you've got to watch the pennies because you have got a small budget. And I would have thought that a lot of that budget would have gone on things like filming permissions and things like that for certain areas, if they bothered with that more than anything.
But it was, I mean, $300,000 not to be sniffed at. I mean, and he was an established filmmaker who'd had theatrical releases.
Yeah, he'd had it.
It makes me wonder why they even had to do it over a year. Why not?
I think it was a little bit of a labour of love. I think it was more of like I'm doing this on the side more, more than anything.
Right.
And I think it was, I think that really comes across because I feel like with independent filmmaking, one of the things that you often get when you compare them to kind of bigger budget Hollywood films is you get a real sense that the people in it and the people working on it are all usually singing from the same hymn sheet. Not always, admittedly, but you kind of get everybody is on board with trying to make the best thing possible. And not to say that in big budget films people aren't doing that, but it gets convoluted and it gets, the drip effect. By the time you get to the big star, you might just be having somebody in there for a paycheck.
Yeah.
Whereas here, nobody's in this for a paycheck because the paycheck would have been, I'll pay for your dinner tonight type of thing. Everybody feel, okay, let's just go and make a great movie. If, that, and I think it's really difficult to kind of recreate. Anybody who's worked in, at college in any kind of art form will know that there's a real freedom when you're studying that you kind of lose as you get as you get older, if you become professional in that particular art field, generally speaking, it then becomes about, well, I need to do this because I need to pay the bills, you know. Whereas when you're studying, you do things that you would probably never even do because you know it's not going to work, but you do it because you're trying to learn about the craft, and that comes across here. It feels like a film where everybody was just trying things, and obviously, when it was 3 hours, there was obviously things that didn't quite work, which is why they cut it. But they used some of that footage actually in Phantasm 4 Oblivion as like flashback scenes.
Right,
So because I remember watching Phantasm 4 and being like, oh, okay, they're using footage from the original film, and then they would show things. I was like, I don't remember that from the original film. So it's a really nice kind of touch.
And a lot of these actors weren't in, apart from other films by the same director, they didn't really break out. As such,
especially Jodie, the guy who plays Jodie, who is Bill Thornbury. He was pretty much in this, another film called Summer School Teachers from 1975, and The Lost Empire, and that was basically it. You know, I think the most prolific actor is Reggie,
right?
But he has just done a lot of. I think Reggie Bannister, that is, who also plays the character Reggie. So nice and easy to remember your character name. He's in a Wes Craven film called Shocker.
Oh, yeah.
He has like a cameo in that.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, does a lot of Don Coscarelli films. He's in Bubba Hotep. And I think he's in John Dies at the End as well.
Yeah.
So it's, and that's, it goes back to that thing of it feeling like, like a film that, if you like it, you're probably the only one who likes it in your friendship group, unless you share it with them and you all discover it together, because you're not going to see these actors in anything else and go, oh, and if you do, you go, oh, it's such and such from Phantasm, So let's just go through the crew, which is a short list, because the director, Don Coscarelli, was also the writer, the producer, the cinematographer, and the editor. So he basically, without him, this film would have been a lot more difficult to make, because he was, the general impetus for the initial idea. And he's worked on things like Beastmaster, which apparently is a little bit of a cliche in American TV, because it was always on HBO, and it used to be a bit of a running joke that HBO used to stand for, hey, Beastmaster's on, because it was always the film that was just on, Bubba Hotep is another film by Don Coscarelli, and also John Dies at the End. Yeah, I was surprised at Bubba Hotep, and, just to bring Bruce Campbell in, the sequels, there is a clear Sam Raimi Evil Dead influence.
Yes.
Really, like, Reggie has
apparently he's name-checked in this film somewhere.
Yes, so I can't remember where it is, but at one point there is a sandbag of sorts.
Right.
And on it says Sam Raimi. But I haven't glimpsed, because I saw that last night in researching it, and then was like, oh, I need to check that out. I never did. But there is a Sam Raimi Evil Dead influence, particularly 2 and 3. So
they get a bit more comical and wacky.
They get a bit more comical and a bit more. They kind of go into a lot more different genres from what this film is. So basically, Reggie wears a plaid shirt, has a chainsaw, and pretty much looks like a B-movie knockoff of Ash. The one thing that this for a film franchise does have, which I think is really, really cool, is Reggie in the second movie creates a 4-barreled shotgun, which is awesome. It's like, Ash has the chainsaw hand and his boomstick.
Yeah.
And it's like Phantasm has a 4-barreled shotgun. So it's awesome. Then it almost has a little bit of a Mad Max feel, the sequels, because it becomes a bit more of a road movie.
Yeah.
In places. The second one, the second one out of the sequels, I would say, is, other than Ravager, I would say is probably the weakest, and that's because they don't have Mike Baldwin in it.
Oh, okay.
Because they didn't think he was enough to carry the film.
Oh.
Because Universal picked it up. Because there's a
Wow.
10-year gap between, or 9-year gap, sorry, it was made in 88. So a big gap between Phantasm and Phantasm 2.
Yeah.
And so they almost cast Brad Pitt in that role.
Oh, right.
But it wasn't quite on the cards for him. And so they cast, and I can't remember the guy's name, so I will just Google it. But I always remember him as one of Phoebe's boyfriends in Friends, who writes erotic novels for children, which is the joke in Friends.
Yeah.
So let me just
James LeGros.
Yes.
Yeah. From Point Blank. Point Blank.
Point Break. Yeah.
Yeah, and Drugstore Cowboy.
Yes, yeah. And so, I mean, he's not bad in that, but you kind of just want Mike Baldwin.
Yeah.
You want, and when I say Mike Baldwin, I'm referring to Michael Baldwin, not the Coronation Street character, because I can hear a load of people going, he's in Coronation Street, isn't he?
We just watched the famous sphere sequence, and I knew that, there's a sphere or something in Phantasm, and it's really cool. I still, to this day, did not know exactly what it did or why it was so iconic, but when I saw the sequence this week for the first time, oh man, I rewound it about 5 times and like, that's gnarly out of nowhere. Just and the gore is really, really satisfying, and I mean, it's just and the prosthetics are, you can see the joints, but it's very, very fantastic. It's fantastic, and then he chops his fingers off and all that yellow stuff everywhere. But what's also interesting is that when that caretaker character is killed and finally keels over, it kind of pisses himself, which you don't see much. I was like, oh God, that's pretty gnarly.
And would you like to know an interesting fact about that pissing himself?
I think I know what you're going to say, but yeah.
So that is the reason why this film was rated R. More than anything, they didn't want the pool of urine.
Yeah.
So in the original theatrical release, to have it rated R as opposed to X-rated, I think it was, they had to make it so you couldn't really see it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so you can have a spherical murder ball that basically drains your blood and squirts it out, but it's the wee that that's too
one
far.
does 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah, it's just sometimes censor boards are like, what are we even doing here?
But apparently, it was actually originally it was actually quite difficult to pick up. The screen, it wasn't entirely clear. It's very clear nowadays on digital 4K screens and everything, but back then so it kind of slid under the radar.
But I think that's why it did, because they had to go back and sort of make it so it wasn't as clear.
Gotcha, right?
For to fit in with that censorship kind of guidelines. And what I like about those spheres is it's the epitome of less is more. Like that's probably more iconic than the Tall Man.
Yeah.
That's the thing that perhaps if anybody hasn't seen Phantasm but knows of it, they will go, is that the film with the spheres?
Yeah.
That is, and you would expect that to be something that's throughout, but there is only that 1 or 2 scenes with it.
Yeah.
It's not every other scene, and it's not the main thing.
It's like Pinhead, actually. Yeah. Pinhead isn't actually in Hellraiser that much, but became the poster boy.
It's the thing that pop culture latches onto, isn't it?
Do you know what? The moment I really started to fall in love with this movie was the scene we're currently watching in the background here. There's always that thing in horror movies, and it's often a young kid or the protagonist. Nobody believes them. And you're screaming at the screen. Just show them. Just kind of take them to that place, or bring. So it's like the one bit in Jaws that annoys me. Where they're trying to convince the mayor that there's a shark out there. And they found Ben Gardner's body, and he asked for the tooth. Oh, I dropped the tooth. I had an accident. And it's like, well, the accident was you found the body. Yeah.
Yeah.
So get the body, show the mayor. that's, now Jaws is my favourite film of all time. I think it's a masterpiece, but that has always bugged me. It's like, just show him. But hey, we know what we're dealing with here. If everyone believes the protagonist, there's there's far less kind of tension and build up and all that.
Yeah,
sort of
it's
stuff.
usually this. In most films of this ilk, it's usually the whole of the second act is trying to convince the other characters.
But what I love about this is that he gets one of those kind of chopped off fingers, puts it in a box, is moving around. It begins to get a bit kind of Stuart Gordon reanimatory around here, doesn't it? I don't know if that followed this, but. He shows his brother Jody. Here you go. He looks in the box. He sees an amputated, wiggling forefinger covered in yellow goo and blood, and he goes, "Okay, I believe you."
Yeah,
I laughed out loud at that. I thought, if only every other movie did that. I thought that was so. And of course, you would.
And the beauty beauty of that scene as well.
Such a brotherly thing as well.
Yeah, it's like we give it the credit for taking that trope and going, actually, we are going to have him believe him quite early on in his claims. But not only that, but then usually in a scene like that, you'd get somebody go, "Whoa!" and big over the top reaction at this finger, and
or they'd go, "Oh, this is a fun toy. This is a cute toy you've made here."
Explain
it away somehow. But no, I believe you.
Yeah, it's just
great.
It's such an understated way of him just going, "Okay." It's just very, and actually I think that's the biggest thing. Like I always say to Hannah when we watch horror films, I always say, if I ever say that I've seen ghosts in the night, can you just believe me and go with me? Because that's more than anything. You get people questioning their sanity, and sometimes that works and it's perfect for the right film. But here it's so refreshing, and it's so refreshing for a film that isn't new.
Yeah.
This is, what's 79 to now, so I can't do the maths quickly, about 51 years old, thereabouts. 50. I can't, it's an old film, and actually it was doing it in 1979. This isn't one where people have gone, I'm going to take that trope and turn it on its head in 2025. And I think that goes back to that brotherly bond where he's not just the annoying little brother. No. He is shown respect by his brother, because there's so many films that are great films, but they do have that kind of, that tried and tested trope of the older brother who's too cool for school and the younger nerdy brother who just wants to be respected, and his brother love him and never does, and it usually the end of the film you get to that, whereas here it's kind of right throughout. That's the thing that kind of keeps them on the same path, is the fact that they that they're they do respect each other. And you've got Reggie as well, who's like a brother from another mother. And interestingly, Reggie becomes like the main character of the rest of the franchise.
I could see that.
He's like, the one who kind of becomes the anchor for the rest of the franchise.
Like Charlie and Critters became the kind of main focus. It often happens. But so do the rest of the films, do they follow up with this and treat this as a dream, a nightmare?
So the second one basically picks up right where it left off. Okay. So that scene where Reggie is saying to Mike, you've had a bad dream. You know, Mike's dead. He died in a car accident. It's fine. It basically picks up right after that, where Reggie hears the tall man take Mike.
Right.
And goes and tries and gets him. So it picks up, for a film that's 10 years later, usually they try and undo what happened in the first one, or,
they've got to look pretty different, especially Mike as well.
Well, Mike is obviously played by...
Oh,
and the general gist of the second one is that Mike has kind of, lost his sanity and I think he goes into a hospital and kind of creates a bond with this female in there, and Reggie's like trying to find him, and the third one I think is probably actually, no, the fourth one, Oblivion, I think is the best of the sequels.
Right.
Because we get a lot of the backstory of the Tall Man, and a lot of it gets explained,
Yeah.
but not to a point where you feel like it's over-explained it.
Right.
So what I like about the Tall Man is the more you kind of know about him, the less you kind of know about him.
So Michael Baldwin is back, though, for Phantasm 3 and 4
Yeah,
and
he's
5.
back for Lord of the Dead. But he's not in it that much in 3, whereas in Oblivion, he's in it quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely got to see them.
Yeah, and
forward to it.
I 100% recommend. As I say, Ravager is a difficult one because it looks so different. It feels very fan service-y and not necessarily. It becomes very much multiverse type thing.
Yeah.
So the general gist of that is kind of goes back to the first one in the sense of you kind of are questioning whether or not what's happening is real. So Reggie, you find out there's one version of Reggie who has dementia, and he keeps going on about this story.
Yeah.
And Mike is there, and he's like saying, I understand your story, but that's not real.
Yeah.
And Jodie the same thing. But then obviously as the film goes on, I won't spoil them for you. Sure. Because I think you'll just enjoy them just as much as you enjoyed this one.
Oh, good.
But there is a lot to love in the 3 Don Coscarelli sequels, particularly 4. I think it really I think you'll like 4 the most because it has a really nice, gives you a bit more information about the Tall Man without going too far where you feel like, well, there's no mystery now. I've watched all 5 of them and watched them all 3 or 4 times. And there's still a lot where I'm like, well, hang on a minute, what's going on there? I don't really understand what's going on. And I like that about it. It's not like a film where it's doing that because it's incoherent.
Yeah.
The episode we've done recently on Southland Tales, where I watched that twice and I'm still none the wiser. And it's because it's incoherent. That's that kind of mystery in a bad way, whereas the mystery here in Phantasm is in a great way.
Yeah.
So, going back to the crew, the composer of that amazing soundtrack and that amazing theme is a guy called Fred Myrow, who you hear about John Carpenter and the Halloween theme all the time, and it is similar, but it's different enough where it's not just a blatant copy.
Yeah.
And if anything, I think I prefer the Phantasm theme. Like, it's one where I'm like, this week I've just been walking around and just going,
yeah.
And the only other person who worked on the film in a proper capacity was that we had another producer by the name of Paul Pepperman, who had also worked on The Beastmaster, Survival Quest, and Don Coscarelli's previous film, Kenny and Company.
Yep.
Over to the cast, we have Angus Scrimm as the Tall Man, who is kind of a journeyman theatre actor. And his real name isn't Angus Scrimm.
Yeah.
But he changed it because I think he was a little bit worried about being in a horror film and his reputation. But actually, this has become the thing that everybody knows Angus Scrimm from.
Of course.
And what's nice is they don't do the Hellraiser trick where by the 5th film they recast and get another Pinhead. He is in every film, and so by 2016, I think he's in his mid-90s.
Blimey.
And I mean, he looks like he's in his mid-90s as well. He does look quite frail, but it kind of works for the Tall Man.
Yeah.
As the films go on, you can see him like visibly age.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of really works for the franchise. We've got Michael Baldwin as Mike Pearson. We have Reggie Bannister playing Reggie, who, as I say, was in Kenny and Company, Phantasm series, Bubba Hotep, and Bill Thornbury as Jodie. So it's, you don't have any recognisable names, in the franchise other than from other than from these films. And going back to perhaps why this hasn't taken off is that none of these people have really gone on to other things or were in stuff before. You know, for example, Halloween had. Why can I not remember her name? This is terrible for a horror fan. I can't remember Laurie Strode's actress. Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, right.
Oh my God. That's embarrassing. That it took me that long. I can hear thousands and thousands of people just clicking off the podcast because I can't remember Jamie Lee Curtis's name.
Sorry, I just look at my phone here. I just the Mike Baldwin in this. He looks very much like the kid in Black Phone.
Yes,
which
he
I
does,
really
doesn't
like.
he? Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's set in the same era.
Yeah,
but
I wonder if that's a bit of an influence.
Yeah, because he really does look like him. Black
Yeah.
Phone's I really like that guy. Scott Derrickson's movies. I'm a big fan of his. But it's made me wonder how, because I know J.J. Abrams is a huge fan.
Well, that's why we have this Arrow video box. It's J.J. Abrams basically was like, they're great films. They need
maybe he'll do a remake.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that because somebody who, look, I mean, if you remake Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Friday the 13th, you know, they're ubiquitous films. Everyone knows them, whether you care about horror or not. They are just part of the cultural landscape. But I think if you were to do a remake of Phantasm, it would have to be someone who really knows their stuff, who really loves it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as you say, you have to have somebody who's a fan of them. And, you know, I said about why I think this film should be remade. And the biggest reason why I don't think Nightmare on Elm Street should have been, or Halloween, you know, some of the Halloween newer ones are okay, but why I don't think they should have been remade is because they don't need a new audience. They're you know, everybody,
right.
Even if you don't like horror films, everybody knows Jason Voorhees, everybody knows Freddy Krueger, everybody knows Mike Myers.
Yeah.
They're laced in pop culture and in the zeitgeist of today's society still. But this franchise does need a whole new audience, and I feel like it gained another section of audience from the Arrow video releases. You know, as anybody who listens or is on our TikTok page will know that I will shout, scream, and holler about Arrow video every day of the week because those releases are fantastic.
Yeah.
And the Phantasm, I think, was the first one I got because I had that 5-disc, 4-film silver lenticular case from when I got it when I was younger from Blockbuster. There's a flash from the past.
Have you still got that?
I don't, because when I was moving out, I sold a load of my DVDs and it was the worst decision I ever made.
I'm with you. I know what you mean.
Whereas as soon as I saw they had, oh great, there's a new box set of Phantasm, I was like, that's amazing. There is even a better version than the box set I have.
Right.
There's a limited edition version which comes in this amazing box, and it's got so many cool features on there. I've just got the standard box set. You can even get a DVD version which comes in a spherical murderable sphere.
Yes, yeah.
Which, I mean, you look on eBay and they're like 150 quid, and I'm like, I can't justify that, but I want to be able to justify that immediately. But yeah, this film needs a new set of fans because it's a film that people have perhaps forgotten about. People haven't, latched onto this other than a small subset of people, and that's why I think those newer those other remakes from the big horror franchises didn't work, because everybody already knew those characters and were like, well, that's not the character that I know. Whereas I think enough people aren't aware of Phantasm so that you can interpret it and do it slightly differently. Yes, you're always going to piss off certain people, but I think it's the perfect kind of film for a remake more than anything else.
Just looking through the box set now, which is why you might hear clicking and rustling as I'm kind of looking through them. Just looking at the cover of Phantasm 2, looks like an AC/DC album.
It's just, all of the Arrow video have great artwork, newly commissioned artwork, but you also get the original artwork as well. And, I go through phases of going, what do I want on there? Do I want the original or do I want the new artwork? And sometimes it's the original, sometimes it's the new artwork. I do want to draw an attention to Roger Ebert's comment on this film.
Oh, I've not heard this.
Because he didn't like this film, and he's one of the fewer critics who didn't like this, because another reason why I thought, perhaps the reason why this film didn't take off is because it wasn't received well when it came out. You know, it made a fair chunk of money from its budget, but maybe it wasn't received well. But actually, the critics loved it, and so did the fans. So, critics rating from Rotten Tomatoes 73%, which for a 70s horror film is pretty decent. Yeah, it's not in your 80s or not, like your Halloweens and that, but it's not, it's fond memories. Metacritic a 7 out of 10. 72% from critics. So people, the critics like this film, and people like this. That shot as well, that's just on the screen, that's very Spielberg-esque.
The backlighting in this movie is fantastic.
And that's, you mentioned right at the top of the episode, you mentioned about the craft of this movie. And there are so many shots in here that I think are just like so good. So that one there, which is very Close Encounters, feels more like a sci-fi film than anything else in the film, is that shot, and it feels so much like it should be in a Spielberg movie more than anything. There's that shot where right at the start where Jodie's walking down through the archway in the mausoleum, and you've got that white marble that is really, really kind of stark and vivid. That's a great shot. You've got where he shapeshifts in from the lady in lavender and switches to the tall man is great. And just generally speaking, even those long shots of that, or of the actual funeral home from the outside, are really, really, well shot. And so what I was saying is critics, did like this movie, but Roger Ebert didn't. And I'm usually on the same wavelength as Roger Ebert. So usually if he likes a film, I probably like it as well. Not that I go, Roger Ebert likes it, I'll watch it. But it's usually, when you research a film, I go, I like that film, let's research that. And you find out, Roger Ebert liked it too. But what he said was, Coscarelli has a nice visual feel. His pacing and camera placement indeed have to do a yeoman work in Phantasm, because what happens in the film is so disconnected. Half the time he's scaring us by default. We're so boggled by the moments that do work, like the stainless steel bloodsucker, that we keep waiting for more. So there's kind of a bit of a compliment there, but it's also a bit underhanded as well, because he does say that this film does feel disconnected. And I don't agree with that. However, I can see how you would make that, you would get that, because as I say, there are every now and again feels like a conversation's missing. I think the biggest one is towards the end of the film where they're in the room with all the the crushed bodies, and I can't remember what they call it, but the two plinths and the portal to the other side.
Right. In
that room, there's like a conversation where Mike comes out of it and says, they have to crush the bodies because of the gravity. And it's like, what? What do you mean? And then Reggie goes, yeah, and then like fills in the blanks. And it's like, how have you got to that from, so I can see how that could annoy some people, because there are kind of leaps and jumps to make here. But going back to that mansion, you may recognise it because it is used in two other films. It's used in the films Burnt Offerings.
Okay.
And it's also used in A View to a Kill.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's called the Dunsmuir Estate, which is in Oakland, California.
They filmed some of A View to Kill in Amberley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
fair enough.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Not 15 minutes from here.
Wow. Little trivia point about my life. I went to a school where one of the houses in the school was Amberley. all of we had 5 houses in our school.
Yeah.
Because I went to a massive, I'm just going on a trip down memory lane now.
Yeah.
I went to a massive school. It's like in the top 10 biggest schools in the country, which was, at the time, it was Littlehampton Community School.
Ah, okay.
We had 5 houses. And when I tell people this, especially people in the area who didn't go to that school, they kind of lose their shit because they can't believe how big it was. So we had 5 houses, which were High Down, which is me, which was red. You had Bignor, which was yellow.
Yeah.
You had Amberley, which was like a lime light mint green. You had Rackham, which was blue, and you had Chantry, which was purple.
We had Amberley, which I think was green, Bramber, which was yellow, Cowdray, which was red, and another one. Oh, God. Oh, it's going to bug me now. I might have to ask someone. Maybe Arundel? No. Gone down memory lane now.
And I'm going to tell you how many form groups we had per year. So we had 5 houses. Each house had 3 form groups. So over the course of the year, there were 15 form groups per year.
Blimey.
And in each form group was about 30 kids. So about 2,000 kids went to Littlehampton.
I had no idea.
So anyway, let's get back to Phantasm, because our international listeners will be going, I've got no idea what they're talking about right now. So back to Phantasm. So that house was used in A View to a Kill, and it's called Dunsmuir Estate in Oakland, California. The flying ball scenes, or I like to call them murder balls, just because it sounds fun. But I think those scenes hold up incredibly well.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the thing that I really think is a real achievement in this film, is you know how all the effects are pretty much done, and you can kind of see the seams, for lack of a better term, but that everything holds up. This doesn't look like a film, considering it was an independent film and it was on a relatively small budget. You would expect there to be more stuff which looks hokey and looks rubbish, but there just isn't. Like,
you're right.
Don't get me wrong, it's not ultra realistic, but it holds up incredibly well. And that scene with the sphere was actually kind of shot in reverse.
Yes.
So they shot the sphere out of a baseball pitcher.
Yeah.
And then cut that with the scene where he's got there the janitor, or whatever you call him, has got it on his head. That was on his head, and then it pulled off.
Right.
So they put it on there, and then they pulled it off, and then they just put that in reverse. You
could see in the reflection of the sphere the tube that goes down the vertical kind of, goes down his face to his nose and pumps out all the blood.
Yeah, and but generally speaking, it still holds up. And
no, it wasn't a criticism. I spent some time thinking, how did they do this? And you could see it piecing together. Wasn't it when the special effects guys on Phantasm, like people who went on to do some amazing, continued to do some amazing stuff?
I would have thought that they, I haven't got that, those names to hand, unfortunately. But I would have thought that those, anybody who watched this film at the time would have gone, the people who obviously done the special effects for this, they're obviously good hands. So I would have thought they would go on to, bigger and better things, because, as I say, I can't believe I was expecting to watch this again. When I first watched it, I was sort of, you kind of rose tinted glasses with it, because I hadn't watched it for so long until I got this box set about 3 years ago. And I was kind of expecting to watch it when I first got it again, expecting to watch it and see through everything and go, this is going to look really bad now. This is going to have dated really poorly, but it just hasn't. And that it's such an achievement, because it's just, it's just one of these things where so many films that are made like 5 years ago, you know, some of the special effects in, you know, some of the earlier Marvel films look hokey now and look terrible, whereas here it just doesn't.
Cross-cutting is really good in this as well.
Yes, it just, I mean, you got the Terminator-esque red and black vision of the spheres, you know. Would you like to know the backstory of the spheres?
Yes.
So, because it's never explained in this movie and it's only in subsequent movies. So basically, when the victims are crushed and made into those dwarf-like creatures, their brain is extracted and placed into those balls.
Yeah.
And through some kind of, you know, kinetic kind of telekinesis, the tall man controls them.
Right.
And that's how they're created. And, you know, I think even, you know, the tall man's backstory, I think, is really, really interesting. Would you like to know about that, or would you like to be surprised when you watch the films?
No, go for it.
So, the name of the cemetery is called Morningside.
Yeah.
Which I, for years and years and years, thought it was the name of the town. But actually, it's just the name of the mortuary.
Okay.
And that goes back to the origin of the tall man, who is called Jebediah Morningside. And I think he was a doctor in the Civil War who, when he was tending to the casualties of the war, became kind of obsessed with immortality and trying to. So he was a scientist, and so he created this machine that could essentially go to the land of the dead and, you know, go to that, you know, that other realm, and went through that, and through what he saw in the land of the dead, he changed and became what we know as the Tall Man. Because there's a really nice scene in Oblivion where Mike basically goes to this other realm through the portal and comes up across this very sort of, you know, 1800s-esque country house. And on the porch, as he's just about to go in, the tall man's there, but he's just a really nice kind of like, oh, hello. Who are you looking for? What, you know, can I help you at all? He's like, oh, my name's Jebediah Morningside, you know, and obviously Mike's like, well, this is what, you're the tall man, what's going on? And it's just a really great scene, and that's why I think Oblivion is the best of the sequels. And just as we are watching on screen, we're going into that room with all the barrels of bodies, and the 2001 Space Odyssey-esque portal, which is a direct influence. You know, I think that's essentially why Don Coscarelli got into filmmaking. You know, just it's so vibrant and stark. That white is absolutely piercing, and it's like sometimes movies are snapshots. So you get the what I would call the shots that are going to be used in the marketing and in the promotional material, and the still on, because we're watching this on the Arrow Video streaming service at the moment. The still of that is Reggie as he's about to put his hands on the two plinths, and that is just an image which I think is so nice to look at, and just goes back to that amazing filmmaking craft that I think vast majority of people would kind of gloss over. You know, the casual moviegoer will kind of watch this and probably go, if they enjoy it, why do I like that film? I may not be able to put their finger on it, but I'm able to look at it and go, it's because of great shots like that, great use of, knowing when to have a static camera, knowing when to do effects and stuff like that, knowing when to do special effects and when to do stuff. And
I'll tell you what, this bit where he's falling through the red kind of misty sky, I reckon that the Lost Boys definitely nabbed that when Michael drops off the bridge.
And, going through this episode, I think we're kind of there were a couple of things that we probably both picked out where we went, oh, that's very similar to this or that. But actually as we go through the episode, seeing just how much of this film has influenced stuff or can be seen in other work.
Yeah.
There is just so much. You've mentioned The Lost Boys, there's 2001 Space Odyssey, there's, elements of Halloween in here, there's, Nightmare on Elm Street, there's just so much in here. And I'm still so surprised that, and it kind of angers me a little bit that people don't know about this film as much as they should. Like, I kind of want everybody, like, if, for example, they do a 70s mystery horror triple bill at our local cinema, if they do a 70s one, they need to have Phantasm in there, because I want to see this on the big screen. Certain films are perfect for home video and watching at home, but certain films are just so much better in the cinema. And I feel like this is a film that on a big screen would just look,
it does look
absolutely
lovely on
chef's kiss.
This big TV screen of yours, to be honest. I watched on a much smaller screen, and no, it does look great.
As I say, it's just what, I can't, I will endlessly wax lyrical about this film, and it's like one of these films where I almost have to be careful who I talk to about this film, because if I suggest this film to people and they watch it and they don't like it, that really annoys me, because everybody needs to love this film. So when we were saying, what should we do next? And you said, well, it would be interesting to do a film that I haven't seen, but you've seen, Ryan. So is there anything like that? And I was like, do I say Phantasm? Because I really want Gaz to like it. I really want him to like it. And I have to admit, when you text me saying, just watched it, I have to say, the first 25 minutes, I wasn't too sure on it. And that was the preview of the message. And I'm like, oh no, he hates it. He hates it. And then you said, but it turned into an absolute corker. Yeah. And I skipped with glee, because it's a sign of somebody who understands films if they like Phantasm.
I like to think so. And I think that's reflective of this film, actually. This is a film that I think this film cares what you get out of it. I think this film, it really is crafted with care and love, and it's influenced by the best. It's influenced the best. Yeah, and I mean, just look at the set design, all this marble and all these kind of ancient kind of ceramic faces and these black doors and gold doorknobs, and it's just not what you would expect. It doesn't feel like what was necessarily happening at the time. Yeah, we can so easily just associate late 70s and certainly early 80s horror purely with the slasher genre.
And for good reason, because Halloween, in terms of its influentialness, is leaps and bounds in terms of the slasher genre. I don't whether or not Halloween was the first slasher genre, but it was certainly the film that catapulted it into the mainstream and made it popular. But here it's a film that is, I'll be honest, I think this is a better film than Halloween. I think there's a lot to love with Halloween. Yeah. But if you give me two options, say, right, we're going to put Phantasm or we're going to put Halloween on, I'm putting Phantasm on every day of the week. I find Halloween slightly boring in 2025. Yeah. Probably because it's one of the first in that genre and you've seen it done so many times. There's nothing really like Phantasm. No. There's bits where you go, that's a little bit this, that's a little bit that, but trying to put your finger on what Phantasm is, like if you ask me to describe Phantasm to somebody who's never seen it, I think I'd struggle, because I think it's one of those films you just need to watch and just need to kind of get your head around and go, just consume it and you tell me what it's about. So as we get towards the end of the episode, what would you say is your further watching? Have you got any kind of films that you go, if you like Phantasm, you will probably like this? We've obviously mentioned a fair few films.
Yeah. It just maybe reminds me of a time before CGI, when perhaps you had to be even more inventive on a practical level. So, in that regard, it makes me think of things like The Blob and that sort of stuff. Another film that, just in terms of inventiveness and kind of care and kind of intertextuality with other films, is Night of the Creeps. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think I have.
It starts off. I'll remind myself of the details of who's involved with it. But it starts off for the first 20, 30 minutes from what I recall. I've only seen it once, but it stuck with me. I saw it in the last 5 years, I think. And it starts off, it feels like a 50s B movie. It's all black and white. And there's drive-throughs and there's, high schoolers and that sort of stuff. And then it turns into a modern day, for the time, a modern day kind of film. So it's kind of bifurcated and kind of toys with narrative and aesthetic and that sort of stuff. So that was really good.
I'll have to add that to my list.
Yeah, let me look it up.
So whilst you're doing that, one franchise that I think would be something that fans of Phantasm would like, just in the sense of franchises that perhaps don't have the love that you think they would, is the House franchise.
Yeah, and The Gate as well. This reminds me a little bit of The Gate. Yeah, the House. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, House, and that's another very, very good Arrow box set.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I haven't got that one, but I need to get it.
So, Night of the Creeps was directed by Fred Decker, who did The Monster Squad.
Oh,
and
yes, yeah.
Co-wrote with Shane Black every now and again.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's got Tom Atkins.
You're saying all the sort of things I like to hear.
Yeah.
Another one that I picked out was Pumpkinhead.
Just
because that's more in the corny sense. And one we did mention earlier is Reanimator as well.
Yeah, there is a lot of Stuart Gordon-esque kind of feel to this. The kind of return of the Living Dead series, the kind of more comical kind of version. And what was I going to say? I think the Lavender Lady, she reminds me of the woman in Life Force, Toby Hooper's Life Force.
Yeah.
Who, often...
Which I do have on another Arrow Video limited edition release.
I saw that far too late and didn't appreciate it for what it was and gave it away. Maybe I should give it another go.
Well, I do have it if you'd like to borrow it at some point.
Well, I'll be working my way through the Phantasm box set before that.
So, Lasting Legacy for me, I think it's kind of been evident for anybody who's been listening that if you're listening to this episode and you haven't watched Phantasm, sorry, we've spoiled it for you. But go and watch it and go and watch the rest of the series. As I say, Ravager is a bit... There's bits in there that are kind of cool, but generally speaking, it's the worst of the four sequels. Yeah. But certainly Oblivion is a great movie. Not to the same kind of standard in terms of filmmaking in a lot of respects, but generally speaking, the rest of the franchise is a strong franchise. Like, it's not, it doesn't take the easy option.
Yeah.
Doesn't do the easy thing and just go, well, let's make it gorier. Let's make it more this. Let's make it more that. You kind of get what you want out of it. So there's a lovely scene in, I think, Lord of the Dead, possibly. It's either the beginning or end of Lord of the Dead. And there's, they're in the kind of lower sanctums of the tall man's area. Because he as the mythology,
lower sanctums of the tall man's area.
That when you hear something back and you realise what you've just said.
Yeah.
That was not a euphemism. Essentially, what I was trying to get at there, because the tall man, he keeps going to different small towns across America and basically, takes everybody out of the small town and demolishes the town and, kills everybody and then moves on to the next. So that's why it becomes a little bit like a road movie, because they go from one town and they go to another town kind of thing. But in one of those, I think it's the end of 2 into 3, there's a scene where they're in the kind of the morgue area of one of the mausoleums, and in this one, you only see the one spherical murder ball, but in that you get like 20 of them, and they all like pin Reggie up against the corner of the room, and it's a little bit kind of Nightmare on Elm Street, where she's kind of going up the wall and being pulled up the wall. It's a little bit like that.
We're just watching the ending here, and again, it was all a dream, which can sometimes be seen as a cliche, but I really think it's just more than that. It's not just it's a dream and that's it. It's it's him trying to suppress his grief and try and perhaps kind of subconsciously keeping his brother alive, who will rescue him and be his big brother, because this is 2 brothers he's lost now, I guess, isn't it? Because Tommy is technically his brother as well, right?
Well, I think they're friends.
Oh,
I think it would be like losing Reggie, wouldn't it? They're really good friends to the point of brothers, but he certainly lost his parents. So, and I think because ordinarily, I'm totally with you that it was all a dream kind of ending. You'd be like, really? That I think 2 things for me. One, in 1979, it hadn't been done to death.
No.
And 2,
I don't know if it had to. I think it's a bit of an overstatement that it's a thing anyway. You don't see it. I mean, you don't see it too much, do you? I guess.
I think there was a time period.
Devil's advocate.
Yeah, there was.
Maybe it's more of a literary thing.
I think there was a time in, I think it was like the mid-90s, where it seemed like every film had that kind of, maybe not that ending, but there was definitely that plot point.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think why for me it works is because there's enough questioning of, well, is it all a dream? Is it just Reggie trying to help him through the grief of losing Jodie?
Yeah.
Because he's young. If I convince him, he doesn't have to deal with this, Or is it a case of, this is the tall man, basically, going through Mike's sanity and, changing and warping reality, because that certainly becomes stuff that's explored in the sequels, whereby you never really know what's real and what isn't real.
They're really roasting their cast next to that fire, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean,
unusual place.
I'm surprised the back of Reggie's ponytail isn't catching fire.
No, poor guys.
So, yeah, I mean, I will always recommend anybody to go and watch Phantasm. Yeah. And if you don't like Phantasm, I will judge you. And if you do like Phantasm, I will also judge you, but in a much more positive way. Just that, that mirror trick has been done to death, but I just love it.
Yeah.
Where you see the mirror, usually on a door or on a medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
And they close it and you see a figure in the background.
Well, I've always associated that with American Wealth in London.
100%, yeah.
And then, of course, that's directly influences Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic little movie, and yeah.
A fantastic movie.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, they do call it fans of Phantasm, either fans.
Yeah. Fans.
Or fanatics. So I would, as I say, as I've said about 5 times now, go and watch Phantasm. I
found the song, actually, that they do on the porch. I just put it in there, Sitting Here at Midnight, it's called, and it came up on I don't quite get it, but it came up on a 1999 album by Steve Cubitt with a K, called Xenophobe Flux. And the rest of the album is just like this kind of scuzzy lo-fi rock metal, but the first track is that verbatim from the film. Yeah. I don't get it. I don't get the connection, but that's
guessing that band.
Sitting Here at Midnight. There it is. You can do it. You can find it. That's bizarre.
So, Phantasm, there is something for everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Bury Our Bones with Cinema. We really appreciate you joining us as we deep dive into the world of film. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media pages to stay informed. You can find us on YouTube, TikTok and Instagram at Bury Our Bones with Cinema. You've been listening to Jimmy Murphy, Gaz Evans and Ryan Etherington. We will see you next time for more cinematic discussions and hidden treasures. Until then, don't forget to keep your bones buried in the world of cinema. And it will be a one-button job. Boom, 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 toom, toom, toom.
I have a terrible tendency to just scroll back and like, you're talking when we're doing it. I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird. But I suppose
maybe if you listen to it back, see if it sounds. I was like, I'm gonna have to stop it because you listen to it back.
Good job I observed that well, wasn't it?